Welcome back, everybody. You know, one of the most frequent questions that comes up for pilots who also use simulators or play airplane games is which is more challenging, flying in real life or flying in simulators. As an aerospace professional who has been a gamer for longer than many of you have been alive, I wanted to weigh in on that particular question. By the way, be sure to subscribe if you haven't and also connect with me on Twitch for more general shenanigans. Anyone even vaguely familiar with the channel will know that I'm a real-life pilot and a former air traffic controller. By way of further background and context for my answer here, I've been a pilot for darn near 20 years at this point. My, how time flies. See what I did there? Plus, I've been an avid gamer even longer. My background in gaming is important perspective here because I was able to use skills I honed in gaming during my time as an air traffic controller. Specifically in radar control, where the ability to interpret data presented in 2 dimensions and quickly process that into 3D data for life and death decision making was absolutely essential. Gaming helped me with that. So I don't dismiss games as being a joke or simply something that social outcasts use to keep entertained. Gaming is more prevalent than ever, it's only going to keep increasing in popularity, and it can actually benefit your real-world critical thinking and analytical skills. With all of that said, it's also important to acknowledge that flying in real life is much harder from a physiological standpoint. When you evaluate the physical and mental stress, conditioning, and literal life and death scenarios with every single actual flight, there's simply no comparison to flying in simulators or games. So that's that. Case closed, real life is more challenging. Well, yes and no. Let's remove that physiological element and just talk about the actual aviating, getting the aircraft to fly the way you want it to. That's really the crux of the issue when someone asks this particular question. Is it easier to get a plane to fly in real life or in a simulator? When we just focus solely on the aircraft, be it real or digital, flying in simulators is, in my opinion, more challenging than flying in real life. Now, several of you have already begun angry comments about how ludicrous that is, but hear me out. First, let's get all this in context. I'm talking about a one-time attempt to do something. In the real world, it might be a do-or-die scenario, or a situation where the aircraft would suffer tremendous damage if you failed. Obviously, you can just reset simulators and games as many times as you want. I'm not talking about that sort of thing. I'm talking about a single attempt to get the plane to do what you need it to. And in those circumstances, in my opinion, flying in real life is easier. And why is that? Well, in the real world, you have consistent rules. The effects of meteorological conditions, the weather, and real-world physics apply to your aircraft similarly everywhere. You know how a hot day will affect your takeoff performance. You understand the conditions in which a stall may occur because they all operate within the same rules. At least for now, until the next reality-bending physicist comes along and it turns out everything we thought we knew was wrong. Either way, there are rules that apply to flight, and I'm not talking about written laws, of course. We're talking about physics, gravity, humidity, that sort of thing, that apply everywhere all the time. So you can take lessons you've learned or experiences you've had on one airframe, evaluate that airframe's differences than another type of aircraft, the length of the wings, for example, and have a pretty good idea how that second aircraft is going to handle without too much problem. You simply don't have that with simulators. How well did the developer program the effects of disrupted airflow over the wings at slow speed? Will a small aircraft buffet before a stall in the game, or did the developers just program the binary equivalent of, if the speed is equal to 40 knots, then there will be a stall, irrespective of attitude of the aircraft and the conditions? If you need an example of this, just look at the rollout of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. The basic flight model seems to change with each update. The trim is bonkers, the flaps are a catastrophe. The game isn't even built to handle helicopters, which tells me right off the bat that something is just wrong with their flight model, that even modders have to make helicopters that are just ultra-slow, stalling airplanes that are mocked up to look like helicopters. Obviously, the physics system in the game isn't realistic if they can't make helicopters work within it. Of course, there are other programming considerations there, so I'll just acknowledge those. Check out the channel for some of the videos of the craziness going on in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Literally every challenge I do there is a harrowing experience because I have no idea what to expect. Then consider different simulators with different levels of detail on all this. Perhaps Digital Combat Simulator World handles low-speed flight and handling one way, while Microsoft Flight Simulator handles that aerodynamic principle differently. Then X-Plane 11 might do it a little bit different still. Furthermore, when you think about real flying, you have the benefit of tactile feedback from the aircraft. As to some of my examples earlier, you can feel when an aircraft is approaching a stall, or the trim or the flaps are operating. In the real world, you can often sense when the aircraft is operating safely and well within its limits and nowhere near the edge of its operational envelope. You also know through experience, instinct, or instruction what to do when things go, perhaps literally, sideways. You know this thanks to your ability to understand the physics at issue and how to counteract or use them. In my opinion, that's just not the case with simulators. Will the cargo load in an aircraft even make a difference to the performance in a simulation? Does the simulation take into account the density altitude when I'm trying to land something ridiculous at an airport in the mountains? Did the developers even know what helicopter mast bumping was, and did they program it into the game? Can I shift the center of gravity on the aircraft in a combat simulator by using an asymmetrical bomb loadout? Who knows? It's going to vary from game to game and version to version. Now, obviously, there are simulation fans out there who have mastered everything there is about a particular simulator or even several simulators. I've got people in my Discord channel with thousands of hours flying in Digital Combat Simulator World. Undoubtedly, they're familiar with the systems and coding of DCS such that they could probably get the aircraft to do whatever they needed to. And kudos to all of you who have mastered those systems and games to that degree. I certainly haven't, and I probably never will except after my real flying days are behind me. So, in my opinion, getting a plane to do what I want it to in a game is more challenging because the games have a greater number of unknown variables. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Obviously, any pilot anywhere can easily argue that flying in real life is harder and simulators are just silly toys for kids. That's one of the reasons I wanted to weigh in on this. I'm in both camps, gamers and pilots. But if I had to do something in an aircraft and I only had one chance to get it absolutely right, the simulator would be more challenging in my opinion. Thanks for watching.